Hello, and thanks for joining us. This is in addition to our Cloud Adoption Framework series. Today I'll be here with Wayne Meyer and Jeff Mitchell, and we're going to be talking about enterprise scale landing zones and some of the DevOps and automation features that we've enabled. This is new stuff, and so we hope that you get a lot out of it. And Wayne, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Matt, and good to be back with you all. And I'm really happy to see Jeff again. We've been there's some cool stuff that we got to show today, so I'm excited for this session. Just before we get going, I think Jeff, we got two or three slides just to tee things up. I think before we get after it, essentially just as a reconfirmation of how we think about customers adopting. There's really these three pillars that we kind of get after. One is helping customers really understand that notion of building out that adoption plan. The Cloud Adoption Framework is our stated intent of how we think customers should be building out their cloud environment. It's really our best practices that we pulled together. So being able to build out that adoption plan, that's all kind of dedicated within this business pillar, strategy and planning. The platform phase is really what we're going to go into a bit of depth today with Jeff. As I say, there's been some late updates that we've just pulled into the entire enterprise scale kind of landing zone, and so we're going to be excited to walk you through from start to finish around how do we actually set this up. So stick around for that. The idea around building out your platform is making sure that we get the right security, networking, kind of identity, getting everything established. Think about this as building that foundation for your house so that you can start building the rooms on top of that. Within this, we'll also enable our minimum viable product around governance. How do we think about the core rules that we think every single customer should have in place? And obviously, we can continue to add and evolve that, and we'll show you how to do that through infrastructure as code. And then lastly, as we get into it, talking about the rooms in the house, this is kind of really all these workloads and how do we go out and adopt and kind of best practices that we provide here. You also see that within, as we stand up the enterprise scale landing zone, we're going to start building up a view for that single management plane. And so being able to have the right solutions intact to kind of get insights into that environment. And then as we get these signals coming out of that management environment and out of your platform and within those applications that you're running, now we can really jump in and start looking at how do we re-architect or build that or evolve the architecture of those applications so that they are secure, reliable, cost efficient, and so on. And so lots of goodness coming out of the well-architected methodology from both assessments to actual written guidance that we have to be able to kind of help you on that front. So the adoption framework, really rich, a lot that it has to cover from start to finish. And before we jump into the actual show and tell and the demos, I want to kind of just quickly walk you through what enterprise scale is. So as we think about that platform piece, enterprise scale really is our architectural approach and our best practices for all things related to standing up that environment. It is a proven architecture that we've run across hundreds of different customers. It is built through being in a very prescriptive way. It's policy driven. We've got a core set of design principles that Jeff's going to introduce you to as we go through it. Not only is this just documentation, but there's actual code behind all of this, as well as easy deployment scripts for both brownfield customers, for greenfield customers, for customers who are kind of just starting their journey and don't know how to do things like CI/CD, but to those customers that are also kind of in the infrastructure as code. So it's hitting a very broad set of customers. And you can go ahead and we can continue to add to this environment and grow this environment as we grow. Enterprise scale, not only just for customers with ARM templates, but we've got Terraform connection, and we've got templates to be able to kind of help build in a number of different areas. So I'm excited to kind of walk you through and show you what we have today. Jeff, let's see what we got. We've actually got these three reference architectures. Actually, we'll go through them in a bit of depth as well. But we've kind of got, actually, there's 4 reference architectures from Foundation, the Hub and Spoke, Virtual WAN, and then the one that's not there is Tray Research. But we'll kind of show you in the GitHub repos as to where all of this is. You can see we've actually got GitHub code that you can actually get into and go and modify and edit yourselves. But we've also got full-blown deploy to Azure, which is just kind of click to run and get you up and going. And the other thing to call out on these reference implementations is that they are modular. So you can deploy the foundation and then you can add to it as you want as you go along with kind of either the Hub and Spoke or Virtual WAN and so on.
Sure. So hey Wayne, let's check out the page where these links come from, right? Within our within the cloud adoption framework, right? So here on the implementation page, right, in the ready methodology, we have the start with enterprise scale, and we have a page called implement enterprise scale landing zone. And so from here we have a number of links, right? Deploy to Azure. These buttons are going to launch our deployment engine within the portal to deploy enterprise scale landing zone, and then we have the actual GitHub repo. And so what I'd like to do to showcase those reference implementations that Wayne was speaking to is I'm going to go ahead and take a look inside of the GitHub repo here, and in this repo we'll find those 4 reference implementations, and the 4 reference implementations are specifically, you know, aligned to helping our customers, they adopt the platform aligned to their business necessity. So we have Contoso reference, scope and design, and each one of these, AdventureWorks reference, Wingtip reference, and Tray research, help meet a customer, you know, meet you where you are, right? And so if we go into Tray research, this reference implementation has outlined the profile, right, for your organization, that you can look and say, okay, are we in the same position, and do we want to evolve later? And you can get a breakdown of what's deployed and then what the architecture is going to look like. So in this case, we see the top level tenant root management group, and then we see the company name here at Tray Research, and from there we see management groups for the landing zone, platform, sandbox, and decommission. And so what we're doing essentially is helping a small and medium-sized business. They've got 3 subscriptions that they've deployed here to manage their platform in a model that is going to allow them to scale. And so the Tray Research reference implementation helps with those small and medium-sized customers who are adopting. Wingtip is for customers who are going to build their own management group. They're getting started. They really want to start understanding the management group constructs, and building out additional management groups is something that they've got to facilitate conversations within their business, or they have to start to plan for. And so in this case, we have 2 management groups, platform and landing zone. So we've got sandboxes not there, as we think about the alignment to for our customers with their subscriptions to the management groups. These management groups within themselves cover specifically those 2 areas, platform and landing zone. And so Wingtip, this is going to be aligned to two subscriptions to get you started, get you in the door with understanding the resources that would go into your landing zone as well as your platform management. The next 2 are about the approach to networking. So we have Contoso, and Contoso uses and utilizes Azure Virtual WAN. So for the customer who wants a managed network, wants to use the managed services of Azure for their network, Contoso is fantastic. And AdventureWorks is our hub spoke design. And so if I click and look at AdventureWorks here, which is what we're going to deploy today, and what we're going to walk through today, AdventureWorks builds out this hub spoke model. We'll look at the architecture here. It builds out this hub spoke model where we've got the management, connectivity, identity, and the landing zone management groups in place with their platform groups over the top. And you can see as we look in the connectivity subscription that we have the hub, right, for our spoke that goes into the landing zone. And so this reference implementation, AdventureWorks, is what we're going to deploy. And what I've done is I've just gone to the GitHub here, right, and we've got deploy to Azure, and I'm just going to start this process by clicking deploy to Azure. So if I start that, we're going to load the portal. When it loads through, it's going to bring over those configuration items that I have currently with my Azure tenant. So it's going to know how I'm logged in. Now, the reason why that's important is because if you're a platform administrator and you maybe have a benefit with Microsoft, something like Microsoft MSDN subscription, you may have access to multiple Azure portals. So when you access this wizard to run through and to deploy the reference implementation, you may have selected the wrong tenant. So one of the things that you can do is you can go up here to the directory selector, and you can select the appropriate directory. And don't worry, you're not going to lose any of the configuration here in the reference implementation that setup template that we have here. So you don't have to be worried about anything that might happen if you have multiple tenants, as long as you've selected the correct tenant. And a good way to double check that is up here in the top right-hand corner. You can actually see your directory name and your user listed there. So this is I've now selected the AdventureWorks deployment. I've loaded it into my Azure portal. I'm going to stop right here, because if I jump back over to our GitHub, then what I can do from the GitHub deployment is I want to look through our user guide, which actually helps us walk through this deployment. So I'm going to go back to the GitHub repo. And from there, I'm going to click on the wiki at the top here. And I'm going to go to the section Deploying Enterprise Scale. Yeah, so this is that architecture, right, where as we look at what you're going to be building out, many of the reference implementations that we reviewed in the GitHub repo are a subset of this, and there are key design considerations and recommendations that we list for each critical design area, such as identity and access management, that help you build out the rest of your requirements after the reference implementation is put in place. And so the reference implementation is your starting spot, your starting position, right? As you move towards building out all the necessity components to facilitate. And there's your landing zone subscription, right, Wayne? This is where you're talking about here in this section underneath Corp landing zones. So
okay, let's have a look and see what some of these prereqs are in terms of kind of getting this thing going, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I've done is I've gone into Enterprise Scale repo, and I've loaded the wiki, which has the user guide for our deployment, and then we've got prerequisites listed right here at the top. And so as we get started to deploy, there's a few things we need to make sure of. The first thing we need to make sure of is that we are a global Azure Active Directory administrator, so we are going to be administrating the platform and the tenant. We need to have that level of access. The second thing is we need to make sure that we have access to deploy resources within the tenant at the root level, at the management group root level. And then the third thing is we have to set our role assignment for our user in order to be able to deploy at the root level. So the first thing is our global administrator. In order to set a global administrator, what we would do is we go into Azure Directory, Azure Active Directory here. We would find our user. I'm going to be running as Jeff, and then my user is at ESLZ-beta-test.onmicrosoft.com. And so I just want to make sure that my user here has the permissions as a member of the global admin role. So that loads up. We can take a look at our assigned roles. There we go, global administrator, check. So I know that I've got that run. The second thing here on our prerequisites was making sure that we have access to deploy resources. So I'm going to go back Azure Active Directory here. I'm going to go down to my properties, and then I can turn this on in the portal by, once I go to the properties, there is a switch here for access management Azure resources. And so if I click yes here, click yes, click save, that's going to give me my permission to my resources. And then the last activity is going to be giving yourself the permission using, you can use either Azure CLI or you can use PowerShell. And so my favorite way to do this is just to start up a Cloud Shell session, right? So just launch Cloud Shell. Once this finishes loading, I think for myself, the default is going to be PowerShell. So there it goes, switches over to PowerShell. And then we can run these 3 commands, right? So if you're running PowerShell locally on your computer, you'll want to connect your AZ account. I've already authenticated because I'm in the Cloud Shell. And then what I'll want to do is I'll grab the, run this command here to grab the context and my user principal name. And then I'll run this command, new Azure role assignment scope, to give myself permission at the root level. And the way that I can validate that is when I go and look at my subscriptions, I should be able to see all subscriptions listed here. And I'll go ahead and expand this group. I can see I have the account admin role, and I can see all the subscriptions within my group. Now, another thing that I can do is I can do a get role assignment. So I can do get role assignment for my object ID for my user, and then I can actually see that scope at the top level as well. So a couple of different options that you can use to confirm that you have that access. So once you've got your access in place, you now have permission to the resources tenant-wide within that Azure tenant. You also have the global admin role. So as a platform administrator, you have the ability to manage roles, and we've elevated ourselves to be able to deploy our ARM templates at the top level. So those are the prerequisites we want to make sure that we confirm going into launching our automation and deploying here. So I'm going to go ahead and close the Cloud Shell. We'll go back to our wizard. And the first thing that we're asked here on our UI is the region that we're going to be deploying in. I'm going to deploy in East US. It's close to me. So from there, I'll go ahead and click on Enterprise Scale Management Group Prefix. Now, the management group prefix is the top level management group. So if I go and we take a look again at our architectural design here, we are talking about the management group. So this top level management group where it says Contoso here in our reference architecture, this is what we're going to put a name on. And we're deploying the AdventureWorks reference implementation. So I'm going to put Adventure W for AdventureWorks in here. And that's going to deploy at that top level. So again, I want to check this out in the portal. Make sure go to management groups here. And at the top level of my management group, we're going to see the default tenant root group. So this is the very top level. And when we deploy, we'll have our management groups listed underneath of here, as well as our subscriptions. So this is a key thing when you think about if you already have resources in Azure. So this isn't a greenfield deployment, this would be like a brownfield deployment. You where we're deploying in the management group, if you already have pre-existing management groups, there will be no effect. Basically, we're deploying in a new management group, so we have a new set of policy hierarchy and subscriptions that are underneath of those. So this is a common scenario, and actually in the enterprise scale documentation on our public site, we have guidance for brownfield scenarios as well. So how to move your subscriptions with your management groups, what considerations you should place. So landing here in the enterprise scale guidance in the cloud adoption framework, we have this transition to enterprise scale brownfield. That's documentation guidance here that can help you with that motion. So I've defined my management group top level prefix, so I'll go ahead and click next. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on my management, security, and governance. So in the critical design areas in enterprise scale, we have management and monitoring, and then we have security, compliance, and governance. And so I want to make some key decisions here. First, when deploying log analytics and enabling it for monitoring my platform resources, I'm going to select yes for that for the default. I'm going to leave the default log analytics retention period to 30 days, and then I'm going to select my management subscription. So my management subscription is going to host all my management activities, my log analytics, my change management, my patch, all of those solutions and my log analytics workspace are going to go into that subscription. So I'll click yes on my agent health solution, and you can see here we've got number of solutions with the log analytics workspace. We're going to go ahead and turn on by default, and these will all go and get deployed into my management subscription. The next one is making sure that my Azure Security Center has an email contact. So making sure that when we're turning on Azure Security Center under our management, we also have a place, or we also have the correct auto enrollment, right, for these services into Azure Security Center.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm really glad that you raised the brownfield point a little, a bit ago. It's something that gets raised to me literally every single time I'm having conversations with customers. They have this concern on the back of their minds, like, hey, if I deploy this thing, what's going to happen to my existing resources? And I think you hit it bang on. It's like, this will run in parallel to what you currently have, so that you can then start to think about how do you move into this new environment that is built with our engineering roadmap in mind, so that ultimately you've now got a future state which is built, which is not kind of, in many instances, cobbled together. And we see organizations taking these things and over a number of years just kind of adding. Whereas now Enterprise has that reference that they can go and build to, and then it will continue to get updated as we go down the line, aligning to engineering roadmaps and so on.
Yeah, that's key. I mean, customers all the time, you've started with something, maybe, you're when you first started adopting the cloud, the first initiative was BCDR, low hanging fruit, DevOps sort of thing. So when you deployed your first landing zone for the platform, you had very minimal requirements. But now you've got big important workloads. You've got a hybrid mandate maybe from your CISO. You've got some security requirements for things that you need to build into the platform. And so, moving from where you just got started in that iterative approach is key, I think, to the cloud operating model. Even in DevOps, I think the term that we have to use, like fail fast, fail often, right? It's like ideate and iterate and have the freedom to fail. And so that's one area, as we look at what a customer currently has, right? In enterprise scale, the networking, the networking, the identity and access management. When we look at the critical design areas within the reference implementation, we want to allow our customers to add subscriptions, add workloads as they need to scale out, and then as the need moves on to or that application has a life cycle that comes to a close, and then we can scale back in and we can match the value of what the cloud is delivering to us in our landing zone. So preventing rework, giving the ability to flow are all core attributes, and even outlined like in our design principle. We have subscription, making sure that our subscriptions can be democratized, and that policy is a guardrail for what we're putting into those subscriptions, and we have some configuration on and visibility with compliance through audit with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And our guidance has changed over the years as well as things have continued to evolve. And so this is a great way just to kind of make sure that we level check back to guidance and best practices.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, so what we've done here is we've enabled that guardrail for our log analytics workspace, and we enabled our guardrail for Azure Security Center. As resources are deployed, they're going to have those services, core services, enabled as they are lit up inside of our subscription. So we've got that turned on. We selected our subscription. Now we go to the next configuration. This is platform DevOps and automation. So when we talk about the Azure, the management of what we're putting into the cloud, we want to make sure that what we're deploying can be consistent, that we can have a mutable process to track on what was changed as far as change management, and all of that is part of managing your infrastructure as code and having a pipeline for the infrastructure that's deployed, right? And so in this stage, in the step, what we're going to do is we're going to configure GitHub to the deployment that we're doing here in the Azure portal, and we're going to deploy a service principal that will connect GitHub to Azure, so that we will connect and configure the full CI/CD pipeline of the platform infrastructure. The first thing that we'll do here in the user guide is make sure on the GitHub side that we have a personal access token. And so we'll just generate a personal access token. There are 3 permissions that need to be in place on this personal access token. Let's see, turn your eyes. I think I'm actually gonna have to do 2-factor on this too, which is a good thing. This is best practices, right?
There we go.
Oh, I didn't. Okay, fantastic. So first permission, repo, and then our next permission here is for the admin on the public key, and then workflow. And if I have any questions on this, I can just go over again, go back to the GitHub repo and visit that wiki and our user guide. And there's a couple of places, you see me kind of going back and forth to this. One of the things that I can do is just aka.ms /enterprise scale. It gets me right to the GitHub repo. Visit the wiki here, and then we'll see in our guide, we're going to go ahead and jump to that section here in our guide to show us the personal access token permissions. Here we go. So I'm just gonna scroll here through, here we go. So workflow, repo, and admin. Once I'm done there, I'm just gonna go ahead and click generate token. And I've already prepared the steps, so I already have my token. And one of the things to be aware of is if you have single sign-on, like we just saw, I had already had a token from logging in earlier, so I didn't have to put that in there. But if you do have single sign-on configured, you will have to go ahead and authenticate and pull that token with a single sign-on so that you have it to be able to execute. So having that put into place, I'm going to go ahead and in our deployment engine here, I'm going to go ahead and drop in my configuration here for my username. Could be a GitHub organization. So we're going to create a repo in that organization or in that user's repository. So that's what we're putting in this field. We're saying, is there a GitHub organization, or for a user, we're going to deploy this repo for your ESLZ connection. My repo name, let's go with Adventure W. So that I know it's from this deployment. And then I'm just going to take that personal access token that I generated before we kicked off here and drop that into place. And now we've got the first part. So the first part is putting in your information for GitHub. The second part is going to be the service principal in Azure. And there's two ways. You can either select an existing service principal, and within the guide, the user guide, we have the permissions that you're going to need for that service principal. So you can go and let's say if you're maybe there's a platform team and a security team, and the security team manages the service principals. If you want to let them know the configuration that you need for your service principal to request that key, you can do it. You can use the instructions here to request that, or you can generate it. You can generate and make it yourself if you have those permissions. Now, being that we just set all of our permissions to global administrator, I know that I can do this myself. So I'm going to show you both. If I'm going to create a new service principal, the first thing that I need to do is go ahead and change this selection, right? So I'm going to create a new service principal. I want to change the selection and go ahead and register my service principal. So over to the right here, you'll see now I have loaded the view. I'm going to call this ESLZ service principal. I'll select the default, and actually I have another, and I want to be able to delineate between them, so I'm going to call this one too. So when I'm cleaning up, I know which one. And then we have the supported account type. So for our deployment, we're going to do a tenant. So we're going to go ahead and click register here. And when this registers, it's going to shift us to the Azure Service Principal app registration page, right? So we're going to go into app registration, and then underneath that service principal that we registered, certificate and secrets. And so the next step is to generate that secret. So what we're going to use for our password, the password value to connect this. So I'm going to click on a new client secret.
Hey, Jeff, can you just, for those that are not familiar with service principals, can you give the 30-second definition of what a service principal is?
Absolutely. A service principal principal is an account that's used to access a resource that's not an actual, right? So it is an account that's used to execute an administrative function and connect. So we call it a service principal. And you use these probably all the time if you're a server administrator. You create accounts that aren't users within your directory, and those accounts are used to authenticate certain services, and they'll have a rotation. Secrets need to be rotated by a certain time.
Great, thank you.
And if I wanted to create a service principal, so we're doing it here, inside of the interface of this deployment wizard that we have for the ARM template. I don't have to do it here. I can go to home. I can go to Azure Active. This is where we create our service principals. I go to app registration once I'm in Azure Active Directory, and from my app registration page here, I'll be able to do the same exact thing that I'm doing in the client. So this is what as I was talking about earlier, maybe your security administrator who's only allowed to create service principals, right? They would come in here to app registrations, and then once they've loaded app registrations, they'll click new app, and you're going to see that when this wizard loads, it's going to look exactly like. So I'm going to click register an application, and what's going to happen is going to when I click on that, now it's loading the app registration page, and you'll see it's going to look exactly. Oops, I clicked on an app. Should not have done that. Let me go back here. So I'm going to click on new registration, and then you'll see that this window, right, Wayne, it looks just like what we were looking at previously to the right. We have the name of our service principal, and then we start the process of creating it.
Absolutely. Okay, so just to kind of, so what we've done so far is we have prepped the environment, given yourself rights in order to create environments within the tenant. You've then gone ahead and kicked off the wizard, which has then said, here's the location that I want to deploy to. Here is the kind of prefix that I want to use for my name. That's the top level. And then we've gone into the CI/CD, getting a GitHub set up. So we've created a personal access token in GitHub so that we can actually create the repo. And now we've connected back to create a service principal that says you are the person. You actually have now rights to be able to deploy back into Azure.
Exactly. So we'll click new client secret from there. We'll put a description in here on our GitHub connection. I'm going to go ahead, and I tend to be a stickler on these kind of things, and put 3 months here, the time that it's going to be good for. Because we're doing this demonstration, I'll clean it up right after. Another reason why I pick a shorter time frame. But then you'll see, now I can actually see my values. Now, this is the one time you're going to be able to see these values. So you need to go ahead and copy them out. This value for the secret, this is the password, and this is what I need. So I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to click back at the top where you see Enterprise Scale Landing Zone. This is that form that we were working on to go through and deploy ESLZ. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Enterprise Scale Landing Zone. Takes me right back to the registration, right back with the service principal name that I registered, and I'll drop that password in, and we are ready to go. So now we have, with those 4 steps, we have configured GitHub, and we have put in the properties for Azure tenant to be able to have that communication for our CI/CD pipeline.
That's super cool. Super easy.
Yep, so we'll click next. We'll go on to our connectivity, and here I'll make key decisions about our hub and spoke network. So here I'm going to go ahead and select my connectivity subscription, because I'm going to deploy my virtual hub network. By default, we're using 10.100. You can put whatever address space you need that matches your requirements, the number of hosts you're going to have here. And then I'll go ahead, and East US is my deployment location. I'm going to go ahead and select that. Now, I've got some other options down here, such as turning on DDoS protection. Maybe I need to deploy a VNet gateway, or deploy the express route gateway so I can connect up components for my express route. Number of options here, even for the DNS proxy for Azure Firewall. I'm going to go with our defaults here. You can imagine, like, if you deployed Azure Firewall, you could actually deploy that by selecting the number of zones you want. So if we talk about availability zones and within our data center and having high availability for this firewall, I can select the amount of zones that I want to deploy that firewall in. And then last is the subnet based upon our default value here. For our address space, we have a subnet that's going to be created for our Azure firewall, and that is our networking. We could build this out further. We could, like you'll see, I click on VPN gateway. I've got options for creating my VPN gateway here. So I'm gonna remove that for now. But this is going to wrap up our connectivity. So we've got our hub spoke network and our deployment here. So what we saw in our reference implementation is we'll have that connectivity subscription that has my hub, and then in my landing zone I'll have another virtual network that is VNet peered to my hub that's in the connectivity subscription. So we'll click identity to go to the next page here. So this is my identity. What am I doing on my identity subscription? Well, there's some key things here on my identity subscription because it's where I host my Active Directory domain controllers. I don't want inbound RDP. There's some specific rules we have put in place, prevent usage of public IPs, right? And as well as ensuring the backup of VMs that are in the subscription. So I'm going to go ahead and select my identity subscription, knowing I have those default configurations in place, and get to my landing zone. Now, this is the North Star. This is where we were heading. Is I need the landing zone. We have shared services in our connectivity, shared services from identity, shared services for our platform management security, but our landing zone configuration is where our applications are going to reside, right? So imagine if I go in here, first of all, yes, I do want to connect my corporate subscriptions with my hub. So just by selecting my subscription I have here, I've got a subscription. You can imagine it could be AKS, it could be SAP, it could be WVD. It's going to be connected to our corporate network. And then once I've done that, I'm going to put in my network address space. So this is for a VNet that's going to be in my application subscription. So one of the things I want to be sure of is this is not an overlapping IP address. I don't want this to be overlapping from the first IP address that we use. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do 10.99.0.0 and then /24 on that, so that we don't have any overlapping IP addresses. That's off the top of my head. So VLSM is something in the Cisco world I had a little time doing. So it's been a while, but we got it done. So I've got my subscription for AKS, SAP, and WVD there. I'm going to go ahead and select online subscriptions. What are online subscriptions? So, if you've ever, working in the cloud, there are times when you have a workload to deploy, but it doesn't need to be connected to anything. And that's actually better for us from a security perspective, is if it's going to be in an enclave or be in its own. So with the online management group, we have specific policies, and it doesn't connect. This is not going to connect back to our corp network. So looking at the online landing zone, I do have one here called landing zone. I'm going to go ahead and select, and we're going to put that subscription into our online. We're going to enable DDoS. We're going to make sure same sort of approach to our identity, that we don't have those public endpoints shut down. This is all going to be internally where we're going to be running this, and there may be, like, we may open it up here. You can see some defaults for Kubernetes cluster. So if we're going to deploy a Kubernetes cluster within our online management subscription, and then run that traffic through a public interface, we're going to set those rules and route it appropriately with Azure Firewall or with Azure Front Door, whatever we need as far as connectivity, but it's not connected to our corporate network. So the big difference here, when we look underneath the Azure landing zone, is we have corp management group for corp connected subscriptions, and then we have online for those online subscriptions that are not going to need connected back to the corporate network. So this is our landing zone configuration. We've got that set. I'll go ahead and click next, and then we will click create once that validation failed. In this case, I know I didn't put my email address in. So I missed the email address here, where that email address needs to be put in place. I put that in, we validate, and then we deploy. I did go ahead and keep open, because I deployed just before our call today, keep open my deployment, so we don't have to wait for fixes there. And I will go ahead and show you that if we go ahead and validate our deployment, I'll go into the management group here, and we can see in our management group structure, we should now have that same structure that's in the ESLZ repo applied to our management groups. And while that loads, let's look at this deployment page. So when at the start of our deployment, right, we can track all the way through any kind of errors that might pop up and work through them if need be. This is a great place to kind of know what your status is. And I think this took, let's see, I think this was 5.5 minutes to deploy and get put into place. So not very long, but not 5 minutes. We have to wait for that to get done, Wayne.
Yeah, so Jeff, so as I kind of look back at this and we think, going through prerequisites, so we've set up our perms, we've kind of done the GitHub stuff. I think prior to all of this, we've got to make sure that we've got subscriptions created. So if we were going to do the foundation, just the foundation version, we need 2 subscriptions. So one for management, one for landing zone. When we do the hub and spoke or the virtual WAN kind of deployments, we're looking for 4 subscriptions. Management group, management group identity,
connectivity,
and connectivity as the 4 base. And if you were going to expand out on the landing zones, obviously you need more subscriptions depending on what you wanted to do there. But I think just having those pre-created, now you can either create them new or you can repurpose existing subscriptions that you got. Bearing in mind that if you are repurposing, whatever applications are in those subscriptions are now going to move underneath this new structure. So that could be a good and bad thing, but I would just validate those apps before you kind of do make any changes.
Yep, absolutely. And the policies that are currently in place, if they currently have policies and you move them to the enterprise scale management group, then they're going to have a new set of policies. I have 5 subscriptions listed here. And the reason for that is because I use 2 landing zone subscriptions, one for online and one for corp.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I think it's an important point because you can see how long it's taken. It's not a long time to create this. You can do this within half an hour if you've got those prereqs in place. So when you get your security team to make sure that you get the service principal, you get your DevOps team or whoever, the automation function, to make sure that you've got that access token. You got your networking function giving you the address space. And then whoever your administrator is from a subscription creation perspective, maybe it's a procurement function or procurement team, then we've got these subscriptions. If you get those four groups or five groups aligned, you're ready to deploy within 20 to 30 minutes.
Yep, exactly. And so let's check out GitHub because let's go and check the repositories here. And we called our repo when we built it Adventure W. So here's my repo that was built from that deployment in Azure. Now I can go into GitHub, and in GitHub I can see my deployment. So I've got right here AdventureWorks. This is my top level management group. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this out and do this side by side just so that we can see specifically the parity that we get here. So hopefully you can see that, Wayne. Does that look good?
Looks, yeah. Well,
yep. Oh, here we go. Start right, start left. There we go. All right. All right. So in this view, right, so here's our management group structure, and then here's my root AdventureWorks. So if I close that drop down, you'll see we're looking at the same level here with root and then AdventureWorks. So I'll go ahead and jump into AdventureWorks in my GitHub repo, and now I see the top level management groups. So if I close these two, you'll see here's sandbox, decommission, landing zone, and platform listed here, so pulled into my repo. And then you'll see these ARM templates that are created. These are the policies that we have in place. So we have the actual, we have the ARM templates that we deployed into the repo have been pulled into, I've pulled from the Azure tenant. So I could go ahead and expand these management groups. And if I click on, so let's look specifically at Azure platform, and within the AdventureWorks platform management group, I'll do the same thing in GitHub, and you see that parity of having management groups and the configured policies here and available. So connectivity, identity, and management, we'll go ahead and click on identity. We'll do the same thing here, and then we'll see these policies that are configured here under identity. So if I go and look in my Azure port, I'm going to see that same parity. And so we have our template now, representation, infrastructure as code of what we put into our platform. And then we'll go ahead and take a look at our assignments here while that loads. And we're going to see these policies pop up. Yes, sir.
Yeah, this was the thing that I was getting my head around, was just kind of that structure. And once you understand the structure, and you can see where those ARM templates apply and to which folder that they're applying to within the GitHub context, it becomes really simple to then start navigating and start looking at where do you drive updates and kind of adding policies as code as well, and then manipulating.
Right. So let's take a look at that. Right. We've got our GitHub repo now stood up, and so let's see. For example, I've got an ARM template I was looking at deploying for location. So what I wanted to do is for my management group for online. Remember, we spoke a good bit around if I go into my landing zone management group and then online here, this is the one with online resources, and I don't want anything to be deployed in this management group that isn't a that doesn't come from out of or get deployed out of ECUS or ECUS2. So effectively what I want to do is I want to drop an ARM policy into the management group here for my online landing zone. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a file. So create new file here. And I'm going to, let's see, we get in here. Yeah, so I've got the ARM template over here. I'll go ahead and copy this guy. Paste it in here so you can see JSON ARM template. We're not going to enforce, but we're going, so this will tell us, ECUS and ECUS2. This is going to give us an audit here. For my file name, let me go with location assignment.json. So we've gotten the user guide. Drop this in here. All right, and then what I'll do is, and this is an important part, right? Is now that I've got my file here and ready to go, I'm going to create a new branch because I could commit it directly, but we're going to follow our best practices here with our CI/CD pipeline. I'm going to go ahead and put location assignment here. And we'll go ahead and propose the new file.
This is one of the most satisfying things that I actually have done in a long time playing around with this, and you can do these PRs and just watch the stuff building by itself. It's actually really cool.
So we've got that put into place now. So we've made the change. We've dropped in our ARM template. You can imagine maybe you already have some policies that you've written, right? And you want to bring those policies with you. You've deployed enterprise scale. You're going to bring your policies over that you've written in a separate. So one of the things that kick off here, right? I've went ahead. I've created a new. I've created a new PR. We're doing some checks. So we're going to go ahead and do a AZOps push pull, and then I'm going to go ahead and merge this. So I'm going to merge. Right here. So we'll go ahead and monitor these actions that are happening and what's taking place here. So I've got this done. We're going to merge the pull request. And I'm going to actually change one thing about this. I want to merge, squash and merge here. So we'll go ahead and get that guy done. And then get that placed. Now, what we're watching for here is what's happening underneath our actions. So if we switch over to these GitHub actions, remember, Wayne, when we started, we were setting up, we started on the DevOps page setting up our CI/CD pipeline. So we got our personal access token from GitHub, and then we got our service principal in the Azure tenant. So this is allowing us then to take that ARM template that's in our repo, and we created as a separate branch. We have maybe some checks go on, and then we're going to merge it back into our root, and then this is going to apply it. So as we've got that started, a couple of things I want to point out here is that if we look at our AZOps pull, we can actually see when I first deployed the activity of pulling the configuration from the Azure tenant into the repo. 4 minutes and 22 seconds that kicks off. So we can actually see as we're as the promotion between what's happening in AZOps with our code and what's happening here in GitHub with our code, and I can see that happening live right on as it's transpiring. So we've got that committed and executed, and this is just as simple as it is, just to take an ARM template, drop it in, say commit under that subscription. So imagine if this was a role assignment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to take a role assignment on a subscription. So if we go back to our code here, we'll go back into our management group. We've got platform here. And then actually, this is not a good example. So we'll go to our corp landing zone here. And I wanted to add a permission into this subscription. Remember the subscription we had, AKS, SAP, WVD, something in the corp, right?
Yep.
I go in here, I drop my ARM template for my permission, my role permission right in here, and off to the races, right? AZOps is going to pick that up, and then our action is going to kick off. So now that we've got that in place, go ahead and we'll run over here to our Azure tenant. And we'll look at our management group structure.
And you can do anything. So whilst we got policies today, you can stand up subscriptions now through ARM templates. You can stand up standardized structure for kind of resource groups. You can drop any resources into there. Obviously, do assignments, all of that through kind of these standardized templates that you can go and build up. So if you were thinking about, imagine bringing on new lines of business or new products or kind of new entities, that could be something that you could stand up in a relatively consistent and easy way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've seen, right, is we've started with nothing in the Azure tenant. We deployed the enterprise scale landing zone. Once we got the landing zone in place, we went to our GitHub and then we dropped an ARM template in. And then once we had that ARM template in there, we went ahead and pushed that into our Azure tenant. So you can see right here, this policy to ring fence Azure regions. I'm going to go ahead and click on that policy list of allowed locations, East US and East US 2. So we can see that change happening, and this gives us the configuration for our pipeline, and gives us the management of our platform through our repo. So from there we can go and say, okay, now that we've got our networking in place, what additional connectivity do we need from other resources? What landing zones do we need for workloads or multiple workloads? And plan out the next phases of what we've designed. So enterprise scale is an architecture and a reference implementation. What we covered in detail today was the reference implementation. The architecture is that golden state of recommendations of what you're going to build, right?
Yeah, Jeff, this is just awesome. Every time I see this stuff, it just shows how simple it is to get customers up and going. I think how quickly we can take you from nothing, or even in that brownfield environment where you might be feeling like, hey, I need to do a rev, or I need to have a new environment set up, or I want to start moving towards CI/CD. This is something that can get stood up. A lot of the times when we think about CI/CD and DevOps, we're only talking to those dev engineers and the people that are building applications. And so, this is a great way to be able to turn around and say, hey, for those IT pros and those infrastructure people, this is kind of going to get connected in, get you started on that infrastructure as code. You didn't have to build up that pipeline and set up that action. It's there, but now you can kind of go through building out those ARM templates and applying things in a consistent way. So I'm excited by the opportunities here and what we're seeing, and then more and more customers, as they start to kind of onboard these reference implementations, how can they rapidly go from that notion of environments that are not quite ready and not quite as code, everything is having to be done manually, being able to manage this at scale through these environments.
Yeah, exactly. And start here, right? So remember, we're connected to the Azure tenant. So if I go into the portal and I make a configuration change, I can do that GitHub action, AZOps pull, and pull that configuration in. So I have the single point of repo for my platform where I can manage, and if there's changes in the portal, we can bring those in.
Fantastic. Well, Jeff, thank you. I appreciate you walking us through that. We've gone through the requirements, the prereqs, the assets are available to everybody to use. If you have questions and you have requirements for any other further sessions, please hit us up in the in the comment section of this. We'd love to be able to come back and spend spend another round of time with you on on various topics of importance. So Jeff, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any closing thoughts or links that you want to kind of drop out before we wrap?
Yeah, let's make sure you check out the Ready methodology inside the Cloud Adoption Framework and get started today. And thanks for having me on, Wayne, Matt. It's been great to visit with you guys again.
Cool. See you soon. Take care.